burst. They threw the ugly daughter at me as a cruel joke, but I took her in my arms and saw the truth. Daniel Harper had never liked loud places, but he had learned how to survive in them. At 34, he was the kind of man people described as decent and then quickly forgot. Basque. He worked long hours at Miller's Auto Repair, came home with grease on his hands, ate simple meals, and slept on the same worn couch he had owned for years. His life was quiet, steady, and predictable. Desperation. He did not complain about it. He simply lived it. Most evenings after work he went straight home. But on Fridays, his co-workers insisted he join them at Parker's bar down the street from the garage.
They said it was good for him. Daniel knew what that meant. It meant they thought he needed to loosen up.
They thought he was too serious, too silent, too alone. That Friday night started like many others. The bar was crowded and noisy. Laughter bounced off the walls. Glasses clinked. A game played on the television, and every few minutes someone shouted at the screen. Bird. Daniel sat at the edge of the long wooden counter nursing a soda while the others drank beer and told loud stories. "Danny boy!" Rick called out, slapping him on the back. "You ever going to bring a girl around here, or you planning to stay single forever?" The group laughed. Daniel forced a small smile.
He had heard the same joke many times before. "Maybe he's waiting for a princess," another man added.
Or maybe he just likes being married to engines.
More laughter.
He had learned that silence was easier. If he laughed along even lightly, they would move on faster. Outside the large front window of the bar, the streetlights flickered on. The convenience store next door glowed bright against the darkening sky. People came and went, carrying plastic bags and paper cups. And, as usual, she was there. The little girl. Daniel had seen her many times before, always near the sidewall of the convenience store. Sometimes she sat on the curb.
Sometimes she stood quietly by the vending machine. She never begged.
She never caused trouble. She just waited.
He didn't know her name. She looked about 8 years old. Maybe 9. Her hair was often tied back in a loose ponytail. Her clothes were clean but old and never quite the right size. Her shoes looked too tight, as if they had once belonged to someone else. But what most people noticed first was her face.
She had a visible scar that ran near her upper lip and toward her nose. It was not fresh, but it was clear.
It told a story of surgeries and long hospital visits. One side of her smile lifted slightly differently from the other. Some people stared openly. Others looked away too quickly. Daniel had seen children from the neighborhood whisper and laugh when they passed her. He had seen adults pretend not to notice her at all. Brave. Inside the bar, Rick followed Daniel's gaze toward the window. "Oh, look," Rick said with a crooked grin. The queen of the sidewalk is back. A few men turned their heads. "Oh, yeah," someone muttered. That kid. Daniel stayed quiet, but he felt something tighten in his chest. One of the younger guys, Tyler, leaned back on his stool. "Doesn't she have a home?" he asked casually. "Her mom works all the time," Rick replied.
Single mom. I heard the dad left years ago. Well, Tyler said with a shrug, I guess that explains it.
The tone in his voice made Daniel uncomfortable. Inspiration. It wasn't concern. It was something else. Inspiration. The conversation drifted for a few minutes, but the girl outside remained the topic. It was as if the men were bored and needed something to focus on. Desperation. You know, Rick said after finishing his drink, I feel bad for her. Daniel glanced at him, surprised. Then Rick smirked. Hooray. I mean, imagine growing up looking like that. Inspiration. A few men chuckled. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. Tyler added, Kids can be mean. She must have a rough time at school. Yeah, another man replied. But what can you do? Life's not fair. Daniel finally spoke, his voice calm. Inspiration. She's just a kid. The table grew quiet for a second. Rick raised an eyebrow. Relax, Dan. We're just talking. I know, Daniel said softly. But he could feel the direction the conversation was heading, and he did not like it. Outside, the girl shifted her weight from one foot to the other. The wind blew lightly, and she wrapped her thin sweater tighter around herself. Tyler suddenly snapped his fingers as if he had an idea. Hey, he said loudly. Danny likes fixing broken things, right? Rick laughed immediately. Yeah, that's his specialty. Tyler grinned and pointed toward the window. Maybe he can fix that too. The words hung in the air. Some men laughed without thinking. Others hesitated. Daniel felt heat rise to his face.
He was used to being the target of jokes about his quiet life, but this was different.
Rick leaned closer.
Come on, Daddy!
You don't have anyone waiting at home. Why not take her in? You'd finally have some company. The laughter grew louder. Inspiration.
Bing! It's just a joke, someone added quickly, but Daniel could see it was more than that.
It was boredom mixed with cruelty. It was people trying to entertain themselves. Inspiration. Before Daniel could respond, Tyler stood up and walked toward the bar door. Let's ask her, he said lightly. Daniel's heart skipped. Tyler! He called. But the door had already opened. Cold air rushed inside. The noise from the bar spilled out onto the sidewalk. Through the open doorway, Daniel saw Tyler approach the girl with a friendly smile. Daniel could not hear the words, but he saw Tyler gestured toward the inside of the bar as if offering something. The girl hesitated. Tyler pointed toward a plate of leftover fries someone had left near the entrance. After a moment, the girl slowly stepped forward. Inside, the men watched like it was a show. Daniel stood halfway from his stool, unsure what to do. The girl entered the bar carefully, her eyes adjusting to the dim lights. The noise seemed to overwhelm her. She clutched the strap of her small backpack tightly. Tyler gently guided her a few steps forward, toward Daniel. Hey! Tyler said loudly, smiling at the group. Look who I found! The men chuckled. The girl looked confused. She glanced around at the unfamiliar faces, sensing something strange in the air. Rick raised his glass. Daniel, he announced dramatically, we found you a date. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Tyler gave the girl a light nudge forward, not rough, but careless. Go on, he said to her. He's nice. The girl stumbled slightly, catching herself before she fell. She looked up, and her eyes met Daniel's. In that instant, everything else faded. He expected to see fear or anger. Instead, he saw something worse. He glances around in desperate, afraid, prepared to be dismissed, prepared to be unwanted. It was the look of a child who had learned not to expect kindness.
She's yours!
Now, the room erupted in laughter again. Daniel did not move. He stared at the little girl standing in front of him, small and silent under the bright bar lights. The scar on her lip was more visible now. One of her sleeves was slightly torn. Her shoes were indeed too tight. He could see her toes pressing against the front. Desperation. She did not cry. She did not speak. Desperation. She simply waited.
Daniel slowly stood up from his stool.
The laughter began to soften as the men realized he was not playing along. He took one step closer to her. Up close, he noticed her hands were shaking just a little, but not dramatically, just enough to show she was nervous. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Desperation. His voice was calm, almost soft enough to disappear in the noise. The girl blinked, surprised by the question. "Bury." The room fell quieter. Daniel nodded slowly.
Hi, Maya. She looked at him carefully, as if trying to understand his expression. He was not laughing.
Brett. He was not smiling in a mocking way. He was simply looking at her. Really looking at her. Behind him, someone cleared their throat awkwardly. "It's just a joke, man!" Rick muttered. Daniel did not turn around. He could feel everyone watching him, waiting for him to push her away, to laugh, to say something clever. But he couldn't. Because in that moment, he didn't see a joke. He saw a child, standing alone in a room full of adults who should have known better. And something inside him shifted. The laughter in the bar slowly faded, but the silence that followed felt even louder. Daniel was still standing in front of Maya. She looked small under the bright yellow lights. Her backpack hung loosely from one shoulder, as if it carried more weight than it should. She kept her eyes low, staring somewhere near his shoes. He noticed she was bracing herself. Not for kindness. A rejection. Daniel had seen that look before. He had seen it in stray dogs that expected to be chased away. He had seen it in customers who walked into the repair shop already convinced they would be judged because they could not afford expensive fixes. But seeing it in a child hurt in a way he did not expect. He slowly bent down so he was at her eye level. He did not reach for her right away. He did not want to scare her. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Maya gave a small shrug. It was the kind of shrug that said she was used to answering that question. Behind him, someone tried to laugh again, but it sounded weak now. The mood had shifted. What had seemed funny a minute ago now felt uncomfortable. Desperation. Daniel glanced at the plate of fries near the entrance. "Were you hungry?" he asked. Maya nodded slightly but did not move toward the food. "Go ahead," he said softly. "You can have them." She hesitated, then looked at the men sitting around the bar. She seemed to be checking their faces, making sure it was not another trick. Daniel noticed everything. The way her fingers twisted the edge of her sleeve, the way she avoided sudden movements, the way her shoulders stayed tense. This was not the behavior of a child who felt safe in the world. When she finally stepped toward the plate, she moved carefully, as if she expected someone to pull it away at the last second. No one did. Hooray. She picked up one fry and ate it slowly. The room was almost completely quiet now. Narration. Daniel stood up and turned toward the others. His voice was calm, but firm. Narration. She's not part of a joke! Rick shifted uncomfortably on his stool. We didn't mean anything by it. Daniel looked back at Maya. She was still eating carefully, one fry at a time, as if stretching the moment. Maybe you didn't, Daniel replied. But she did. Dial. No one answered that. After a moment, Daniel removed his jacket. The air inside the bar was warm, but he remembered the wind outside. He knelt again and held the jacket open slightly. Narration. It's cold out there, he said. You can wear this if you want. Maya looked up at him, confused.
For me? She asked quietly. Yes.
For you. She slipped her arms into the sleeves. The jacket was much too big, but she seemed to relax just a little inside it. That small change, just a slight drop in her shoulders, did something to Daniel's heart. He stood and looked toward Tyler. I'll walk her home. Tyler raised his hands defensively. Hey, man, it was just for fun.
I know, but his eyes said something different.
He gently held the door open for Maya. Cold night air rushed in again, but this time it felt clearer, calmer. They stepped outside together. The street was quieter now. A few cars passed. The convenience store lights buzzed softly. Daniel could still feel the stares from inside the bar, watching through the window. Maya walked a few steps ahead of him at first, then slowed down as if unsure whether he would follow. I'm coming with you, he said softly. Ah! She gave a small nod. For a while, they walked in silence. Daniel did not want to overwhelm her with questions.
He remembered being a quiet child himself. He knew how uncomfortable too many words could feel.
After a minute, he spoke gently. Do you live nearby? She pointed down the street. 2 blocks! He noticed her shoes again. They were worn at the edges, and her toes pressed tightly against the front. Do they hurt? He asked, nodding toward her feet. She looked down quickly, then shrugged again. A little. Daniel felt that tight feeling in his chest return. Have you had them long? They continued walking. Streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. The wind lifted a few strands of her hair from her ponytail. Do you wait outside the store every night? He asked. Sometimes, she replied. For your mom, yes. She works late? Maya nodded. She works at the hospital. Cleaning. Her voice held no complaint. Just fact. Daniel pictured her sitting alone outside the store many nights, waiting under the lights because the apartment might feel too dark or too quiet. Does she know you wait out there? He asked carefully. She says to stay close to home, Maya answered.
But it's boring inside. There was honesty in her voice. No blame.
No anger. Just a child trying to pass time. They reached a small apartment building with faded paint and narrow windows. A single porch light flickered near the entrance.
This is it, she said. Daniel looked at the building.
It was old but not abandoned. Laundry hung over one balcony railing. A bicycle leaned against the wall. "Which floor?" he asked. "Second." They climbed the stairs slowly. The hallway smelled faintly of cleaning supplies. A door at the end of the corridor had chipped paint and a small number hanging slightly crooked. Maya stopped there. Daniel hesitated. "Is your mom home?" She shook her head. Not yet. He checked the time. It was later than he thought. "Do you have a key?"
She nodded and reached into her backpack. Her hand still shook slightly as she unlocked the door.
Inside, the apartment was small but tidy. A couch sat against one wall. A tiny kitchen table held a stack of papers and a half-folded blanket. Daniel stayed near the doorway. He did not want to step in without permission.
"Thank you," Maya said quietly, still wearing his jacket.
"You can keep it until your mom gets home," he said. She looked up at him again, studying his face as if trying to understand something. "Why?" she asked.
Why? What? Why are you being nice? The question was simple.
But it carried weight. Daniel paused. He searched for the right words, something honest but easy to understand. "Because you deserve it," he said finally.
Maya blinked. No one had probably told her that in a long time.
She looked down, thinking.
Kids can tell when adults are pretending.
Daniel knew that. So he stayed calm, steady. After a moment, she stepped closer and held out the jacket. "You'll be cold," she said. Daniel smiled slightly. "I'll be fine." She hesitated, then lowered the jacket slowly. "Okay." He stepped back into the hallway. "If you ever need help carrying groceries or something," he said carefully. "I work at the auto shop down the street." "Miller's Auto! You can tell your mom!" She nodded. Before he could turn away, she spoke again.
They call me names, she said suddenly. The words came out fast, like she had been holding them in.
Desperation. "At school." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "I know," he said gently. Desperation. She looked surprised.
You know? I can guess, he replied.
She touched the scar near her lip without thinking. It was a small motion, but it said everything.
They laugh, she said, like in there.
"Sometimes people laugh because they don't understand," he said. "And sometimes they laugh because they don't know how to be kind." Maya listened carefully. "But that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you," he added. She stared at him for a long moment, as if testing whether to believe that. Then she gave the smallest nod. A door down the hallway opened and a neighbor stepped out briefly. Daniel realized he had been standing there longer than he thought.
"I should go," he said softly.
"Okay." He turned to leave, but just before he reached the stairs, he heard quick footsteps behind him. He looked back. Maya stood there, holding the jacket out again. He smiled. Narration.
You really don't want to keep it?
She shook her head. Slowly, carefully, she stepped forward and handed it to him. When he took it, her fingers brushed his hand for a second. She did not flinch this time. That small detail did not seem important to anyone else. But to Daniel, it meant everything. Because earlier, in the bar, she had flinched before he even moved. Now she stood steady. Good night, Maya, he said. Good night, she replied. As he walked down the stairs and out into the cold air, Daniel felt different. The jokes at the bar no longer echoed in his mind. Instead, he kept seeing her eyes when she asked, "Why are you being nice?" It bothered him that kindness felt strange to her. It bothered him that she expected laughter instead of care. When he reached the sidewalk, he glanced back up at the apartment window. A small light turned on inside. She was home. Safe for now. But Daniel knew something had changed inside him. He had gone into that bar as the quiet man everyone teased. He walked out feeling something heavier and clearer. What had started as a cruel moment had shown him something true. The world had decided what it saw when it looked at Maya. But when he looked at her, he did not see what they saw. He saw a child who had learned to stand alone. And he could not shake the feeling that she should not have to. Daniel could not stop thinking about Maya. That night, after he returned to his small apartment, he sat on his worn couch with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The laughter from the bar, the jokes and the cruel smiles of the men replayed in his mind. But what stood out most was the little girl's eyes.
Her gaze had held a quiet question. Why are you being kind to me?
He had asked himself the same question many times that night. And now, sitting alone in the soft hum of his apartment, he realized he could not ignore her. Not when she lived in a world where so few people cared about her feelings, her fears, or even her basic needs. The next morning, Daniel returned to Miller's Auto Repair, but his mind wasn't on the work. He could fix engines, replace brakes, and repair transmissions with skill and focus, but this was different. Maya's small face, her hesitant smile, the way she had flinched at kindness, stayed with him as he worked. During lunch, he asked his coworker, Paul, quietly, "Do you know anything about that little girl who waits outside Parker's convenience store?" Paul shrugged.
Yeah, Maya, right?
Mom works nights. She's always alone. Kids call her ugly sometimes. Poor thing. Daniel frowned. Does anyone help her? Paul shook his head. Not really. Nobody has the time. Daniel nodded, thinking, then I will.
Over the next few days, Daniel made small changes to his routine.
He left a warm sandwich at the convenience store for Maya on his way to work. At first, she only looked at it suspiciously. But when he smiled and waved from across the street, she picked it up. She didn't speak much, but the faintest trace of a smile appeared. Daniel discovered that her mother, Anna, was overworked and exhausted. She worked long shifts as a hospital cleaner and barely had time to rest. Maya had been left mostly to herself after school. sometimes waiting outside the store because it was safer than the dark apartment. Daniel could see how much the neighborhood had ignored them. Brr. One afternoon he decided to do more. He stopped by the store on his way home from work and asked Maya, "Do you want to come with me for a little while?" She hesitated, glancing round at the busy street. Inspiration. But Daniel's calm tone and steady presence made her feel safe. Slowly she nodded and walked beside him. Versus. He took her to the small park nearby. The swings creaked under the weight of older children, but he found a quiet spot where no one bothered them. He pushed her gently on the swing, smiling as she laughed for the first time in weeks. That sound stayed with him. Inspiration. It was light and fragile, like a small bird taking flight. "Do you like school?" Daniel asked. Inspiration.
Maya shrugged. I do.
Sometimes. But kids don't like me. Inspiration. Daniel frowned. Why? She looked down at her hands. Because I look different. Daniel thought about what she said. He had noticed her scar before, the way her teeth were slightly uneven, the small differences in her face that made other children cruel. Inspiration. He had seen how adults avoided looking at her. But he knew something no one else seemed to understand. You know, he said gently, being different is not a bad thing. It's what makes you special. Breath.
And anyone who can't see that, they just don't understand.
Maya stared at him, almost as if she didn't believe him. Daniel sighed softly. I know it's hard. I know people can be mean. But there are people who will see the real you, not what others say. And I want to be one of those people. For the first time, Maya smiled without hiding her face. It was small, uncertain, but it was there. After that day, Daniel began visiting Maya more often. Sometimes it was for small walks, sometimes to bring her books or help her with homework. Other times, he took her to the park or a small library in town. Slowly, a routine developed. Maya began to look forward to his visits, and Daniel found himself thinking less about his own lonely evenings and more about how he could help her. One Saturday, he went to a local nonprofit organization that helped children with medical needs. He spoke to them quietly, explaining Maya's situation. They listened and offered assistance for the surgeries she had needed but could not afford. Daniel arranged appointments and even drove her to some of them, holding her hand and comforting her when she grew scared of the doctor's offices. Maya's mother, Anna, was grateful but hesitant. She had always felt like a failure for not being able to do more for her daughter. Daniel reassured her gently, saying,
You're already doing the most important thing, loving her.
I just want to help. The world, Daniel realized, had already given Maya reasons to feel small and unwanted. But he could give her something different: care, attention, and belief in herself. School events became another challenge. One day, Maya was cast in a small school play, given the role of a tree. She didn't have lines, just a spot on the stage. But even that small role worried her. Will they laugh at me? She asked Daniel one evening, wringing the hem of her jacket. Not if you don't let them, he said, crouching down to meet her gaze. You are amazing, Maya. You have every right to stand up there and shine. On the day of the play, Daniel arrived early. He stood at the back of the room, observing the crowded auditorium. Children ran about, teachers whispered instructions, and parents chatted nervously. When Maya walked on stage, her small frame stiff and cautious, Daniel clapped louder than anyone else. The sound of his hands echoing in the room seemed to reach her. Slowly, her shoulders relaxed. She glanced toward him and caught his eye. Brr. For a moment she forgot the whispers, the stares, and the cruel comments she expected. She was just a child on stage, and someone saw her.
After the play, Daniel walked her home. She chattered quietly about her friends, her schoolwork, and small dreams she had not dared to share with anyone else before.
Narration. Daniel listened carefully, sometimes offering advice, sometimes just smiling and encouraging her. Weeks passed, and Daniel's help became more consistent. Narration. He realized that what Maya needed most was not just care for her daily needs, but someone to stand with her against the world. The teasing, the stares, the cruelty. All of it could make a child withdraw. Narration. But with him by her side, she started to feel safe to be herself. One afternoon, Maya's mother fell ill after a long shift at the hospital. Brr. Daniel arrived to find Maya sitting quietly on the couch, holding her mother's hand. "She's really tired," Maya said softly. Narration. "I don't know what to do." Daniel knelt beside them. "It's okay. I can help. Let's make sure she rests."
He helped Maya make a small meal for her mother, carried bags of groceries, and even called the doctor for advice. Anna looked at him with gratitude, but it was more than that.
Bird. She looked at him with relief, realizing that someone had stepped into their lives not because they had to, but because they cared. After that day, Daniel made the decision that would change both their lives. He spoke with Anna, gently and carefully.
"I want to help Maya more."
Narration. "I can make sure she goes to school safely, gets her appointments, and never feels alone. Would you be okay if I did that?" Anna hesitated. Bray. I don't know. You're already doing so much." Brr. "I want to do more," Daniel said. "I want to make sure she has someone who believes in her, someone she can count on."
Anna's eyes filled with tears.
Bring. Shh. "Thank you," she whispered. It was not a sudden dramatic decision. Narration. There were forms to fill out, permissions to request, and legal steps to follow, but Daniel approached them with patience. Narration. Step by step, he became more involved in Maya's life. Meanwhile, Maya began to change in ways no one else could see immediately. Her laughter became easier. She stopped shrinking away when strangers looked at her. Narration. She started to raise her hand in class, and slowly, she began to believe that she had a right to be seen. Breath. Daniel noticed the difference in small moments. When she finally admitted she liked painting, he bought her a small set of brushes. When she proudly showed him a drawing of a tree, he smiled genuinely and said, "You're really talented, Maya. Keep going." One evening, after a long day at the auto shop, Daniel stopped by her apartment. Maya ran to the door and hugged him tightly. "You stayed," she exclaimed. "I did," he said, laughing softly.
I wouldn't miss it. It struck Daniel how fragile and strong she was at the same time. He had taken her under his wing, yes, but in truth, she had taught him too.
Narration.
She had shown him that courage is quiet, that strength does not always roar.
That even a small voice can demand to be heard if someone listens. And as the weeks turned into months, Daniel understood something important. Helping Maya was not just about fixing problems or giving her what she lacked. It was about standing with her, believing in her, and showing her that the world's judgment did not define her worth. He had taken in a child the world overlooked, but what he gained was far greater. He gained the chance to witness courage, resilience, and hope grow right before his eyes. And in that growth, Daniel realized something even more profound. Sometimes the people we think we are saving in truth save us too. Years passed, and Daniel's life had quietly shifted in ways he could never have predicted. The quiet man who had once spent evenings alone on a worn couch was now a constant presence in Maya's life. What had started as a single act of kindness had grown into a deep, steady bond. Maya had changed too. She had grown taller, stronger, more confident. The scar on her lip remained, but it no longer defined her. She smiled without hesitation, laughed freely, and had learned to carry herself with a quiet pride that no one could take away. The cruel words of the past were still there in memory, but they had lost their power over her. Daniel often remembered the first time he had met her, standing in that bar while the men around him laughed. He remembered how small and uncertain she had been, how carefully she had held herself, as if expecting the world to reject her at any moment. And he remembered the shock of realizing that kindness could feel strange to someone who had never experienced it before. Now, looking at her, he could barely recognize the same child. She was still gentle, still quiet at times, but there was strength in the way she carried herself. Strength that had always been there, waiting to be nurtured. School became a place of growth and pride for Maya. She joined clubs, participated in art competitions, and even took part in public speaking events. Each time she stepped onto a stage or presented her work, Daniel was there in the audience, clapping louder than anyone else, cheering the loudest. One spring evening, Daniel received a call from Maya's school.
They invited him to attend the annual student awards ceremony. Maya had been nominated for Most Resilient Student for her dedication, courage, and kindness to others.
Daniel felt a quiet pride that swelled in his chest. The night of the ceremony, he arrived early, taking a seat near the back of the auditorium. Parents, teachers, and students filled the room with chatter and laughter.
Daniel felt a familiar twinge of nervousness as he waited.
Even after years of knowing Maya, he still felt protective, worried about the world noticing her before he could shield her. When Maya's name was announced, she walked confidently to the stage. Her smile was bright, her steps steady. She looked at the audience, then spotted Daniel in the crowd.
Her eyes lit up for a brief moment before she focused back on the podium. She began to speak.
I have always felt small, she said, her voice clear and steady, carrying across the room. People have laughed at me, called me names, made me feel like I didn't belong. But one person showed me something different. One person looked at me and didn't laugh.
One person saw me for who I truly am.
Daniel felt his chest tighten. He knew exactly where she was going. That person, Maya continued, believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He taught me that kindness is stronger than cruelty and that courage is not always loud. He taught me to stand tall even when the world tells me to shrink. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. For years he had acted quietly, without expectation or reward. But hearing her words, seeing the genuine gratitude and strength in her voice, he realized he had been given something far more precious than he could have imagined. Maya finished her speech, and the room erupted in applause. She turned toward Daniel and smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the heart. He clapped until his hands ached, unable to stop. Around him, other parents and teachers nodded, some wiping their own tears. After the ceremony, Daniel walked to the stage. Maya ran to him and hugged him tightly.
He held her in his arms, feeling the weight of all the years they had spent together, all the struggles, all the moments of fear, and all the triumphs.
You did it,
he whispered.
No. she said softly, her head resting on his shoulder. We did it. In the weeks that followed, the story of Maya's resilience and Daniel's dedication spread through the town. Some of the people who had once laughed at her at the convenience store reached out to apologize. Others were inspired to act differently toward children who were different or struggling. But Daniel never focused on them. He was not seeking recognition. What mattered was that Maya had found her strength, and that he had helped her see it. Life continued with quiet joy. Daniel helped Maya with school projects, attended medical appointments, and celebrated each small victory. He noticed how she grew into her own identity, how she began to understand her value without relying on anyone's approval. One afternoon, while walking home from the library, Maya paused and looked up at him. "Do you know why I like being with you?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "Because you see me," she said. Not just the scar, not just the names, not just the things people say about me. You see me, Bear. And that makes me brave.
I always will, Maya. Always.
As the years passed, Daniel and Maya became a family, even though it was unconventional. He did not adopt her formally at first, but in every way that mattered he was a parent, a protector, and a guide. Maya's mother Anna remained in the picture, deeply grateful for his presence. She had grown to trust him completely, knowing that Maya was safe and loved. School gave way to high school, then graduation. Maya's confidence only grew. She was involved in community projects, mentoring younger children and advocating for kindness in her school. Daniel watched in awe as she transformed into a young woman who carried empathy and strength with her everywhere she went. On the day of her high school graduation, Daniel sat in the front row. Maya walked onto the stage with grace, a cap perched neatly on her head, gown flowing behind her. She gave a speech to the audience about resilience, courage, and the power of one person's kindness. "And there was one person," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Daniel, "who believed in me when no one else would. Who taught me that being different is a gift, and that we all deserve to be seen. That person is Daniel Harper."
He changed my life, and he gave me the courage to change mine. The auditorium erupted in applause.
Daniel felt tears streaming down his face as he stood to applaud, clapping louder than anyone else. Maya ran to him after the ceremony, hugging him tightly, and he held her in his arms once again. In that moment, Daniel understood the truth he had known deep inside all along. It had never been about appearances. It had never been about correcting what was wrong. The world often judged what it could not understand, but kindness, belief, and patience could see past all that. Maya had taught him as much as he had taught her. She had shown him the power of resilience, the quiet strength and courage, and the beauty of a heart that refuses to give up. And Daniel had shown her that she could trust, that she could believe in herself, and that there were people in the world who would see her worth even when the world did not. Years later, Daniel and Maya would still walk together through the streets of their town, sometimes stopping at the convenience store where it had all begun. Children would pass by, staring briefly, whispering, but Daniel and Maya had grown to ignore the stares. They knew the truth. They knew that the world could laugh or judge, but it could never take away what they had built together: trust, love, and the knowledge that seeing someone truly, kindly, and completely is more powerful than anything else. Maya often said that Daniel was her hero, but Daniel always shook his head. "No, Maya," he said gently.
You are the hero.
You were brave from the start. Bert. And that was the truth. Sometimes the smallest gestures change the biggest lives. Bert. A kind word, a gentle hand, a quiet presence in a world that often forgets to notice. These were the things that mattered most. And Daniel had learned that when he took Maya in his arms that first night, he had not just saved her from the cruelty around her. Narration. He had seen the real truth. A child full of courage and heart, waiting for someone to recognize it. And in that recognition, both their lives were transformed forever.